the original question that was posed. That's page 4. Page 4. The original question that was posed was, where does most of a plant's mass come from as it grows? Right, that was the question that we tried to form an argument about last class. And you had 4 options. You had the sun, the soil, air, and water. So at this point, we've eliminated 2 options. We've eliminated the soil with the experiment that we saw that said that a tree gained 72,000 grams of mass while the soil lost 60 grams. The sun, we just eliminated today. Sorry, sun group. So the sun, it provides energy but energy is not matter, so it doesn't have mass. The sun cannot be the source of the mass. So what we're going to talk about right now is between air and water, which is the answer. So before I do, there are 2 ways that you could have thought about this question that I want to make sure to acknowledge both. So the first way, talking to the water groups. So if you consider the overall mass of a plant, it's known that most plants are between 50 to 95% water. It's known that some plants are upwards of 90% water, and that's because, to varying degrees, plants store water in their cells. So if you said water, there is an argument there where you can say that most plants, their overall mass is between 50 to 95% water. The other side of this, though, is that many biologists, when they think about this question, they're concerned with what's called the biomass, which is kind of the same thing as saying the dry weight of a plant. That is, what is the substance of the plant as it grows? We call that the biomass, where the energy is stored. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So, what's been determined has been that, I'll come back to this in a second. What's been determined is that a plant, every plant, I'll go back to that page in a second. A plant is mainly made up of something called glucose. And glucose, which we're going to talk about a lot today, is also called a sugar, the sugar molecule. And most of, when you think of like the bark of a tree, the leaves, composed of something called cellulose. And cellulose sounds like glucose. The only distinction is that cellulose have multiple glucose molecules linked together in this long chain. So actually, when you see a plant, most of the stuff that we see, the biomass, is glucose. So the substance of a plant is mainly made up of cellulose, which is glucose linked in a chain. Which means that if we can figure out how glucose is made, then we can determine what contributes the most to the biomass of the plant between air and water. All right. Before we get into this question, I want to talk a little bit about the air. So one common thing that came up in the discussion, not only in this class, but also in my other classes, is does air have mass? Does air have mass? And if so, does it have a lot of mass? Because if it's going to be a viable answer, it should have a lot of mass in order to contribute to the mass of a plant. So there's actually a quick way that you can do to prove that air either has or doesn't have mass. So let's take a look at how we can do that.
Now, you know what's weird? Sometimes matter can't be seen or felt, but it's there. Like the air we breathe. Air is an example of gas, the third main state of matter. And I probably know what you're thinking. How do we know air, or any gas really, is there if we can't see it? Well, we can prove it by doing an experiment. Science. Let's start by asking the question, is air matter? Because if it is, it should take up space and have weight, right? To see if air takes up space, look it, I can easily drop an empty balloon into this little box, but a full one won't fit. That's because the air that fills the space inside the balloon is bigger than the space inside the box. Now, does air have weight? Let's try something else. Take 2 empty balloons and tape them to the ends of a meter stick. Then we'll hang the meter stick on a string so that it's perfectly balanced. Now let's see what happens if we blow up just one of the balloons and put it back on our meter stick. Check it out. The end with the full balloon sinks. It weighs more than the empty balloon because the air gives it extra weight.
Okay. So, just in case there was any disagreements, so air does have mass. Air is matter. So when you think about what's in the air that actually has mass, that gives it weight, that caused the balloon that's blown up to sink. So air is a collection of atoms that follows this breakdown. So this is a distribution of what percent of the air is made up of which type of atom. So 78% of the air in this room is composed of an atom called nitrogen. 20% is oxygen, and then carbon dioxide or things like oxygen gas. Carbon dioxide, they make up about 0.03%. So there's actually not a whole lot of carbon dioxide in the air in comparison to, say, nitrogen, which is the majority. So, in your notes, just to be clear, so air does have mass. So yes, air is matter. It contains atoms such as nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, etc., which give it its weights. Nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon. And that's why we hear about things like carbon dioxide or oxygen gas. Okay. So, if we've got that settled, then we can start thinking about this question. So, clearly, water has mass, it takes up space, so it's matter. So either air or water, we have to figure out which one contributes most in the production of glucose, which would give us our answer of where does most of the biomass as a plant grows come from, the air or the water. So, you might have seen this before, but how exactly does a plant make glucose? Well, we're talking about photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, if you looked at here, it goes something like this. So we have carbon dioxide that's being absorbed by a plant, as well as water. And with solar energy, which functions to rearrange carbon dioxide and water, we get glucose, and we get oxygen. The plant's releasing oxygen, and also making this glucose molecule. So in your notes, we have carbon dioxide and water. Leading to glucose and oxygen. This is facilitated by solar energy. We call this photosynthesis. So, just to be clear, so the solar energy that's facilitating this transformation, it gets captured and it's stored in glucose, which is a chemical potential energy. This is how a producer captures energy. It takes it from solar energy and stores it inside of a glucose molecule. All right. So now that we know, that this is how glucose is produced, right? We're trying to figure out how glucose is produced because this will give us the answer to our question, right? Is glucose, is it mainly being made from the air, or is it mainly being made by components of the water? So, to answer this, I need one person for every table. Come grab some cups. So one person for every table, come grab some cups over here.
No, not like that. They're unconfused. I don't want to be
All right. So, what I'd like you to do. Every person go ahead and take a handful or a little bit of red whites and black beans. Red, white, and black beans. All right. So in front of you, you should have a couple red, couple black, and couple of white beans. And take a look at the screen here. So, sixth period. Sixth period. We're going to be using these to model what actually is going on and to answer our questions. So, before we move on, so the red bean here is going to represent an oxygen atom. An oxygen atom. A black bean is going to represent a carbon. And a white bean is a hydrogen. All right. So, a couple things to note here. Sixth period. I don't want to talk over people right now. Thank you. So, these beans are different in color and in size for a reason. So they're different in color because we're going to represent different atoms. These are found in the air and in water. But they're also different sizes because they are not equal in their mass. So for the sake of discussion, oxygen atoms are the largest of the three. It's because their mass is approximately 16 units. 16 units of mass. A carbon atom is about 12 units of mass. And a hydrogen is only 1 unit of mass. So, what we're going to look at here is when you think about these three atoms, so they're different colors to keep track, and they're also different sizes because they are different mass values. So oxygen atoms, in reality, are the heaviest atom out of the three. Carbon is a close second, and hydrogen is way at the bottom as the lightest atom that we know. So, what I want us to do is we're going to form what are called our reactants. So, reactants, sixth period. All right. So our reactants, those are the things that we start with. What I want you to do is I want you to make one carbon dioxide molecule. So I've got a carbon and 2 oxygens. And I want you to make one water molecule. So I've got 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. Again, just as a reminder, carbon is black, oxygen is red, and hydrogen is white. So every person on your table should have those 2 molecules. You should have 1 carbon dioxide in front of you and 1 water. Emmanuel, can you stop doing that? Thank you. So, 1 molecule of carbon dioxide in front of you and 1 water, just like I've done here. One molecule of carbon dioxide, 1 molecule of water. All right. So, these reactants that are in front of you, You've got a carbon dioxide and a water. Your job is to take 30 seconds using only those beans, these two right here. I want you to make a glucose. Using only these beans right here, I want you to make a glucose. All right. I lost you 6th grade. So, take a look here. In front of you, you should have a carbon dioxide and a water. Can you give me a thumbs up? Do you have that? Give me a thumbs up if you have a carbon dioxide and a water in front of you. Just one of each. Okay? So, what I was asking you to do is from those reactants, the carbon dioxide and the water, with energy, we're going to rearrange that into glucose. Now, glucose, Jose, if you look at the top right, how many carbons does a glucose have? It has 6. And if you look at the subscripts here, 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. So, with 1 water and 1 carbon dioxide, can you make a glucose? 1 water and 1 carbon dioxide, can you make a glucose molecule? No. So, raise your hands. I'll ask the question again. Raise your hand if you say yes. So, with 1 carbon dioxide and 1 water, can you rearrange those into a glucose molecule? Yeah. Raise your hand if you say yes. Okay, put your hands down. Raise your hand if you say no. You can't. Okay. Caleb, could you explain why we cannot do that? Right, so, you said a really key point here. So I'm intentionally asking you to do something that is impossible to get us to see the point. That if I start with a carbon dioxide here and a water, Parrish, how many carbons do I have to start off with? It's all good. So carbon is the black, right? We only have 1. We've got 1 carbon dioxide and 1 water. We only have 1 carbon, right? How many do I need to make a glucose? How many carbons do I need to make a glucose? 6, right? I need 6. So if you just have 1 carbon dioxide, you can't make a glucose. You need 6 carbons, right? So now, I want you to figure out what is the specific combination of waters and carbon dioxides that you need in order to make 1 glucose. So how many carbon dioxides do you need? And how many waters do you need to make 1 glucose? Give it a shot at your table. How many carbon dioxides and waters do you need? You don't get it. I'm just excited. So you see where it says carbon and there's a 2, right? Okay, I just basically multiplied that by creating that 6 carbon. And then where it says H2O, there's a 2 Since there's 12, since there's 12 of them, that means you need 6. The under the molecule.
not hydrogen. That is oxygen. The white ones are hydrogen.
Yep.
The red one is oxygen. No, you don't need oxygen. No, the H2, the H2O, right? The H and the O is together. So you what? Yeah. So you need six hydrogen. These are hydrogen. And then this is how you six. I already made it. And oxygen to the. You don't need oxygen. No, carbon's a black one. Carbon's a black one. Red one's the oxygen. White one's the
All right. So let's do this together. So Vincent, I overheard you. Do you have an answer here of how many carbon dioxides and waters you need? Okay. They said 3 carbons and 6 hydrogens. So take a look at the equation. So what we're trying to make, we are trying to make a glucose molecule. One sec, Caleb. So a glucose molecule has 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. In order to make that, we need a certain combination of carbon dioxide and water in order to get that molecule. So Caleb, do you have a solution to this?
You need 6 waters and you need 6.
All right. So he says you need 6 carbon dioxides, 6 waters. So that's your tables. That's your tables. Go ahead and make those molecules. So I'm going to put 6 waters. And 6 carbon dioxide.
We don't need oxygen. You kept saying we needed oxygen. Because hydrogen includes 1 oxygen, right? Yeah. Hydrogen includes 1 oxygen.
No.
Oh wait, we have to make one.
All right. So check this out. So Caleb, he suggested that you need 6 carbon dioxides and 6 waters in order to make this work. So Caleb, can you walk us through? How did you get 6 carbon dioxide?
Well, 6 carbon dioxide, we need 6 carbon.
Right, you need 6 carbons in order to make a glucose, right? The only place you're going to get a carbon from will be your carbon dioxide molecules, right? How did you determine the amount of hydrogens that you need to get?
There's 2 hydrogens in every water molecule, so I just had 6 water.
Right, so he said you need 12 hydrogens, and since there's 2 in every single water, you need 6 waters. Okay, Donovan and Manuel, last reminder. Okay. Thank you. So, These are what we call our reactants, what we start with. At the end, what we produce, we refer to as our product. So, when we think about this process, what ends up happening is the solar energy is allowing the matter here to rearrange. The way this is going to work, hey, Donovan and Manuel, can you step outside? Thank you. So, if you think about glucose, so glucose, you need 6 carbons. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take all of my carbons from the carbon dioxide, I'm going to put them next to the glucose. So I've got 6 carbons that have been contributed from my carbon dioxide molecules. Okay. Now, think about the question that we're trying to answer. All right, so we're trying to decide, does the air or does the water contribute more mass to the making of glucose? So far, carbon dioxide is found in the air, right? So it's contributed 6 carbons. And each carbon, Chris, how much does each carbon weigh? What's the mass of each carbon? Yeah, 12 units of mass. So far, the air has contributed 6 carbons, and each carbon is 12 units, for a total of 72 units of mass so far. Now what I want you to do, I want you to take all of your hydrogens from your water. So my 12 hydrogens, from the water. So now what we've got is we've got 12 hydrogens that have been contributed by the water. And 1, how much does each hydrogen weigh? Yeah. That's okay. How much does each hydrogen weigh? 1 unit, right? So far the water has contributed 12 units of mass. The air has contributed 72. So now what it comes down to is, where does the oxygen for glucose come from? So it can either come from the carbon dioxide or it can come from the water. It turns out when you add energy into water, the oxygen immediately is released. And so all of the oxygen from the water becomes oxygen gas. Which means that all of the oxygen that you need for glucose comes from carbon dioxide. And Noah, how many oxygens does glucose need? How many oxygen does glucose need? 6, right? So I'm going to take 6 of my oxygens from carbon dioxide. So now I've got my full glucose molecule, and the air has contributed 6 oxygens, which each weigh 16 units. And 6 times 16, we get 96 units of mass. The rest of the oxygen gets released into the air. So how many total oxygen gas molecules are we left with? But oxygen gas is O2, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we have 6 oxygens that are produced in this reaction. So if you take stock here, the air in total has contributed 168 units of mass to glucose, but the water only contributed 12. So what we can say here, if if we look at this reaction, is this. So, what you just modeled is the photosynthesis equation. So not only did we determine that most of the matter that's used to make a glucose molecule, we determined that it came from carbon dioxide, but also you balance an equation. That is, you determined how many of the reactants you needed in order to make one glucose molecule, and you're left with 6 oxygen. So, back to the original point. So if a tree or a plant, the biomass is mainly made up of glucose, then the answer to our question is that the air actually contributes the most amount of mass to a plant as it grows. We're talking about the biomass of it. Say that again. So, because glucose is the major component of the biomass of a plant, and we just determined that carbon dioxide contributes 168 units of mass to that glucose, and water only contributes 12 units. We can say that carbon dioxide is actually the major source of mass for a plant as it grows. That's the point. So what I want you to do, take your beads, put them back in the correct cups, and bring them back to the lab bench. Keep your notebook out. We're going to close with our exit tickets. Whoa! And once you have your 3 cups, please bring them to the lab bench. Excuse me. All right, we're coming back together in 3, 2, 1, and 0. So you should have gotten a blank slip of paper from me. Write your name at the top, your group number, and period 6. Yeah. So, your exit ticket, what I want to know is up to this point, what your answer is to this question. So on that paper, hold on that paper, you're going to have about 12 minutes to explain your answer to the following question. So, according to what we just talked about, Where might a plant get most of, pay careful attention to the wording here, most of its derived mass or its biomass from as it grows? So your explanation should not only provide evidence and reasoning that supports your answer, but also evidence and reasoning to eliminate the other three options. There are 4 total options: the sun, the soil, the air, the water. You are choosing, what's your final answer? Explaining why, and then explaining why the other 3 are incorrect, which we've already done in part. Okay. You can use your notebook. It is individual. Make sure your name is on that strip of paper. 12.